Today I'm going to be discussing when you should actually be strengthening your hip flexors, not foam rolling and stretching them. What's going on, you guys? It's Blake Bowman here with GuerrillaZen Fitness, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about when you actually need to be strengthening your hip flexors as opposed to stretching and releasing them. To begin, this notion that the hip flexors are tight in everyone and across the board they should be foam rolled and stretched on a regular basis is really common. However, due to your own position of your pelvis, that might be the exact opposite of what you need to be doing. In fact, that might actually be contributing to the problem in the first place. So in this video, I'll be discussing this, telling you when you should be strengthening the hip flexors versus stretching them. And then at the end, I'm going to show you some of my favorite strengthening exercises. All right, with no further ado, let's get right into it. I want to really start off by telling you when you should be stretching the hip flexors versus when you should be strengthening them. You should be stretching the hip flexors likely if you have what's called an anterior pelvic tilt, which is excessive forward tilting of the pelvis, and the curvature in your low back is exaggerated. We call that lumbar lordosis, okay? Hyperlumbar lordosis to be specific. If your lower back is stuck in a hyperextended position, too much arching, and your pelvis is tilted forwards, and you sit for many hours a day, you likely would indeed benefit from stretching and releasing the hip flexors. Contrary to that, if your hips tend to tuck underneath you, all right, and your low back is too flat, there's not enough curvature there, and most importantly, if your hips kind of shift out in front of you a little bit, and a bone on the outside of your hip called the greater trochanter, if that moves in front of your ankle bone, the lateral malleolus, all right, you can see this on yourself if you just get somebody to take a photo of you from the side in a relaxed posture. If you're standing like this, hips kind of tucked underneath you, pelvis pushed forwards out in front of you a little bit, your low back is too flat, in this scenario, what you likely need to be doing is strengthening the hip flexors, not stretching and releasing them, because that's simply going to make the issue worse. Let me break this down for you so that you can understand this a little bit better. What do the hip flexor muscles do? Well, they flex the hip, okay? That's their job. That's what hip flexors do, okay? Hip flexion is when your knee is being brought up towards your chest, okay? You're in this position when you're seated. This is what the hip flexors do. When they turn on and contract, they pull the knee up. So once we understand what the muscle does, in order to stretch the muscle, what we do is we put the joint into the opposite range of motion in terms of what the muscle typically does, its function, all right? So to stretch the hip flexors, we extend the hip. We basically take the leg back behind us. We do that classic kneeling hip flexor stretch and really open up the angle of the hips, okay, into extension. We open up the front of the hips. That places the hip flexors underneath a stretch. Now, you see the thing with sway back posture, which is what this is called when your hips tuck underneath you, your hips push forwards, and your low back is too flat. Your hips are already in an extended position just when you're talking, okay, and standing. I'm not talking, that's not what I meant to say. Just when you're standing, all right? When you're standing with sway back, your hips are tucked underneath you, your low back's too flat, and your hips are pushed forwards, the hip angle is already too wide, all right? And essentially, you are stretching your hip flexors just standing with this type of posture, okay? So if you have this going on, your hip flexors might feel tight, but they are tight because they are long and taut, like two ends of a rope being pulled away from one another, right? Of course, that's going to feel tight, and there is tension there. But there's tension there because the muscle is too long, all right? It's overstretched. And what actually needs to be done to facilitate getting it to feel more relaxed and to get it to function better is to strengthen it and give it some slack so that it can actually release. If you have this going on, your hips are pushed out in front of you, and your hip flexors are tight, if you're stretching on the hip flexors all the time, doing that classic kneeling hip flexor stretch, foam rolling the area a lot, you're basically stretching and elongating a muscle that's already too weak and too long in the first place. Again, that's like taking a muscle or like a rope with two ends of a rope being pulled away from one another and then pulling on it even harder, expecting that to have some sort of benefit to your body. Oftentimes, this will simply just inhibit the muscles more, okay, the hip flexor muscles, and it will frankly just exacerbate the problem, make things worse. All right, so now that I've kind of educated you on when it's the best time to actually be strengthening the hip flexors versus stretching them, let's get into some of the exercises here, some of my favorite hip flexor strengthening exercises that you can easily do from home. The first exercise that I'm going to share with you is called Supine Unilateral Hip Flexion. This just basically means you're laying on your back, you're working one side at a time, all right? It's pretty simple to do. You're simply just going to lay on your back like this with both knees bent, feet planted flat on the floor. You're going to raise out one leg, straighten it out completely, and then you're just going to raise up, just like this. This is it. This is a very, very, very simple hip flexion exercise that you can get started with. It's probably one of the easiest ones that I'll show today, but that's pretty much it. It's very simple. As you can see, we're flexing the hip. That's what that motion is right there. This is activating, turning on, firing, and contracting the hip flexors. And this is probably a good one to start with if you've been really stretching your hip flexors aggressively and you suspect that they're really weak there after watching the beginning part of this video, all right? So for that, you can just start with 3 sets of 10. If you want to make that a little bit more challenging, you can kind of like pulse it like this, tinier little motions like this, and then you can like hold this isometrically. We just really want to get those hip flexors firing and get your body used to facilitating a contraction there. So this is a good one to start with. You can do anywhere between like 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 15 reps of this. This next one is a big favorite of mine. I'm going to demonstrate with a stick, okay, just because I don't want to move around in my house and have to, basically bring my tripod along with me. You can do this against the wall. I'm just going to be holding a stick, okay? But this is kneeling assisted hip flexions, all right? So basically the way that you're going to get set up with this is similar to doing that classic hip flexor stretch, okay? You're going to put one knee down. If you have a wall in front of you, you can put your hands on the wall like that, all right? If you have a stick, you can grab the stick as well. You want some sort of assistance here, something to hold on to help your body stabilize. But remember, what is hip flexion? Hip flexion is when the angle of the hip joint decreases, right? So in this position right here, you're holding on to something out in front of you for stability, a wall or a stick, and all you're going to do is you're going to raise that front leg up, place it back down, just like that, okay? You're trying to keep a neutral spine the whole time as you're doing this. And for this, you can crank out, again, about 3 to 4 sets, anywhere between 10 and 15 reps per side. All right, this is significantly more challenging than the first one that I showed you because it's kind of working the end range of motion with regards to the hip flexion, all right? So you should feel this even more, aggressively in the hip flexors. This is a really good one. I like doing this before, I do squats or train lower body. This last one is standing hip flexions, all right? So you can do this assisted as well. You can hold on to a stick, you can hold on to a wall. Same idea, but what we're doing now is we're working more of the full range of motion of the hip, right? We're going from this extended position with the leg straight. Again, we're holding onto a wall or something, and now we're coming all the way up, right? Into deep hip flexion like this. This is it. All right, pretty simple. Again, keep a neutral spine. Try not to let your back move too much as you're doing this. That's pretty much it for that one. It's pretty simple to do. You can actually progress that, make it more challenging after your body's adapted to the body weight version of it, and that's become easy by adding a load to it, all right? Basically adding weights to it. There's a variety of different cable straps that you can attach to your ankles. Do this kind of laying down, right? Let's say there's a cable machine over there. I got it strapped onto my ankle. You can pull up like this. I think there's a device called Monkey Feet, which allows you to essentially attach dumbbells to your ankle. I'm not sure of the name of that product, but there's a variety of ways that you can actually load this movement up. There's even machines that you can use in the gym, which will push down on your thigh, if your gym has one of these. You see them sometimes, not every gym has one, but then you pull up into hip flexion. All of these are suitable progressions to that, but I really wanted to show you stuff today that you can easily do at home with minimal equipment. There you have it. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, give me a like down below, leave me a comment, let me know what you want me to make videos on in the future. Also, if you feel like you're kind of overwhelmed with information out there on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet, you're not sure what applies to you, what doesn't apply to you in terms of corrective exercise, joint mobilizations, strengthening, foam rolling, working your muscle imbalances out, this is what I do as a coach. I help my clients correct their mobility, their posture, their muscle imbalances, and any other kind of biomechanical issues that we see going on, faulty movement patterns, stuff like this. So this is what I've been doing as a coach for the last 7 years. If you want to apply for my coaching and you want to work with me one-on-one, just open up the description down below, click coaching there, that'll take you over to my website, and I'll basically present to you an application there, apply, and you and I will jump on the phone personally to discuss your coaching needs. Lastly, if you haven't downloaded my free ebook, Posture the Ultimate Life Hack, make sure you go ahead and do that. All right, it's free. I show a bunch of different corrective exercises in here that help you restore your posture. You can get that just by clicking this over here. If you want to see a video similar to this video today, check this out over here. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead and do that over there. That's it for today. See you next time.